Welcome to Mr. Holloway's Foundational Java Skills series. In this video, we're going to talk about ArrayList and ArrayList methods. But before we get started, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe and all that good stuff. Class is now in session. Now, in previous videos, I've talked about arrays, and this is what an array looks like. We declare, we initialize it, we can assign it values. But an array list is slightly different. So we're going to look at some of the differences between an array and array list, and then we'll write some code. So with an array, if you remember, the array is fixed in size. So once you create, let's say it has 5 spaces, you can't resize it. It does not resizable. But an array list is actually is resizable. So it can grow, it can shrink at any time. Arrays can hold both primitives and objects. Array lists can only hold objects, and we're going to look at that as well. Size. So if you want to know the size of an array, you just simply do the array and then you do .length, which is the length attribute. With the array list, you use the size method. In general, arrays are generally faster and they use less memory. Array lists are slower. All right. And I'm going to cover some of this stuff, particularly with array lists. There's built-in methods for sorting, searching, manipulating data, which you don't have in arrays. All right, so let's start coding. All right, so the first thing we need to do when we're working with an array list, we have to use this import statement. So what we need to do is we need to import java.utils. And we want to bring in the ArrayList class. Okay, so this will not work without with this import statement. An ArrayList will not work with this without this import statement. All right, so let's create an ArrayList. So the way we do it is first we just declare the type of data that we're going to create, and we're going to create an array list. Okay, and then what's different here is we use what's called an angle bracket. So we do this, and then we put the type of data that we want. But if you remember in the chart, we can't put, like, if we want a bunch of ints, we can't use the primitives. We actually have to use an object. So this integer is what's called a wrapper class, and it wraps around the primitive so that we can manipulate it a little better than what we can without just being a general primitive. All right, so that is its data type. It's the exact same thing as doing something like this for an array. And so now I'm going to create this array, and we're going to call it numbers. And what we're going to do is we're going to initialize the constructor. So we're going to say ArrayLists, and we're going to do the exact same thing. Integer. Finish that off with an angle bracket, and because we're calling a constructor, I'm going to use my opening and closing curly brackets. So that is how we declare an array list. Now we have an array list. It's called numbers, and the next thing we want to do is we want to add data to it. And so the way we do it is we use the add method. So I'll just actually put this down here. So this is the first method we're going to learn about. It's called add. And the add method can be used there's actually 2 versions of the add method. We're going to just use one right now. So I'm going to add some data to it. Now, let me come back to a graph that I used actually earlier for populating arrays. But with an array list, so imagine you have a table. And if this was an array, this has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 seats. If it was an array, we could only have the 6 seats. We couldn't have a 7th position there, or we couldn't take away a seat. The great thing about an array list is that we can actually add seats dynamically. So at runtime, so as we're running the program, we can add and take away seats. And so that's a big difference with array lists. All right, so what we want to do is pretty simple. We're going to add 4 items. So we're going to say numbers dot add. And because this is a method, if you notice, I get my suggestions or code hinting. And so I want to add the number 10. And then that's it. So I'm going to say numbers dot add, and we'll add 20. and then we'll say numbers dot add dot 30, and we'll add one more. So we'll do numbers dot add dot 40. Okay, so let's talk about a difference here with an array. So with an array, if let's say we had our array was named nums, so we're going to get an error now. But the way I would assign a value is I would do the index, and I would say equals, let's say 10. And that's how I would assign a value to an array. But we're using an array list, so we have to use the add method. Okay, so next thing we want to do is let's just print out the values. I'm going to say system system.out.println, and we're just going to print numbers. All right, so we're going to see what we have inside of here. And as you can see, here are all the values of what's inside of the numbers array. All right, now the next thing I want to show you is we're going to do the size method. All right, so the size method just tells us the size. It's equivalent to what was the length attribute with an array. So let's do it. I'm going to say let's just copy this here. And oops. All right, so because this is a method, let me bring this up a little bit. All right, so because this is a method, we're going to say numbers dot size, and that's going to give us the size of the array. So let's see what happens here. And so this is where we get the 4, right? This is the size. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's how we determine the size of the array. All right, so let's use the remove method. So we want to remove this. All right, so let's remove this. So let's say, I'm going to say numbers. Let's remove, numbers dot remove. And as I type, I get code hinting, and so we want to remove, let's remove that first item. So we're going to remove index 1. Okay, and so index 1 is going to be this 10 here, and then let's print the size again. So actually we're going to do this, redo this over. So we'll do that. Let me move this down here to distinguish between our code blocks. So in this case, we're going to print the original numbers array list and the size, and then we'll remove this 10, and then we'll print it out again, and then get the size of it. So let's run it again. And actually, yeah, that makes sense. I'm sorry, I said we're removing the index 1, which is this index here. And while we're on that, let me review that as well. All right, coming back into the slide. So an array list, just like an array, is a zero-based index. So the first item starts at 0, and then this item is 1, this is 2, and this is 3. So I made the mistake in the code by suggesting that this was actually 1, and that's a mistake that you make from time to time. But just remember that an array list also has a 0 index. Okay, so if I were to now come back and let's do the exact same thing, and let's look at the order of everything right now. So right now, there's when we remove an item, so we remove index 1, we have 10, 20, 10, 30, and 40 with the size of 3. We're going to remove index 0 now. So what do you think is going to be removed? So what is going to be the final result of these two lines? So lines 22 and 23. Think about that for a moment. I'm going to go ahead and run it, and then we'll see. And there it is. So at this point, when we're starting the code, we're going to remove index 0, which is going to be the 10, and then that leaves us with 30 and 40. All right, and then we get a size of 2. Okay, so that's one of the big differences with an array list, right? We can resize it dynamically, where you can't do that with an array. Once you create an array, you give it a specific size, it has to stay that size. Okay, next, let's look at the get method. All right, so the get method does exactly what it says it does. What should I do? I'm gonna comment this out for now, and then I don't want it to get too convoluted. All right, so we're gonna do numbers, and what we want to do, actually, let me see. I think we can still use this. Actually, no, it doesn't matter. All right, so I'm just gonna put this here, and then what we're gonna do is we're just gonna print out the list, and then we're gonna get a specific position. So if you remember, let's get the index 3. So if we go 0, 1, 2, 3, we should get that index, which should be 40. So we're going to say numbers dot get, and so this is expecting an integer of what we want. So we're going to do index 3. So let's print this out. And so index 3, as you can see, is 40. So simply the get method basically gets something out of the array list. Let's see what happened if we were try to get index 4, because there is no 4 here. Sorry, if we were to do and get index 4, let's see what happens. Okay, so right now there's 0, 1, 2, 3. So there's only a third index here. There's no fourth. So let's see what happens if we try to get the fourth, the one that doesn't exist. As you can see, we get an index out of bound exception, which is a very easy error to fix. It's generally speaking, especially with arrays or array lists, it's just you're trying to get something that doesn't exist. All right. Next, we want to look at the set method. All right, so we're going to look at set. So the set method basically just does exactly what you think it does. It actually sets a value. So let's do it. So I've printed everything out. We're going to do numbers. We're going to say dot set, and this expects two arguments. All right. So the first one is, where do we want to basically replace? So if I want to put, let's say if we want to put 100 at index position. I'm sorry, it should be the reverse. So we want to do the index we want to replace. So we're going to do index 3, and we're going to put that number 100 there. So basically what we're doing is we're replacing 40 with 100, and then we're just going to print it out. So we'll print out the end result of that. Let's put that semicolon there. And so let's run this. And we get an error, and I forgot to comment this out. So let's go ahead and rerun this. And as you can see, the original array list has 40 here. This is the result of our line 15, which is a get method, and then here we're using the set method where we're replacing 40 with 100. All right, the last thing I want to show you is we're going to use the add method again, but this time we're going to use it with 2 arguments. So what we want to do here is I'm going to say numbers dot add. Now, the first time that we used it, we used it with 1 argument. Okay, when you use it with 2 arguments, what that simply does is it adds an item at a specific index. All right. So what we want to do is, let's say we want to add to index, let's say index 4, and then let's say I want to add 200. All right. So that's simply just adding a number at index 4. And now, if I run it, you can see the number 200 has been added to the array list at position 4. All right, so that concludes ArrayList. In the next video, I'm going to talk about looping through an array. list, an array list. So anyway, class is now dismissed. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.